Now that you've learned a little bit about the SAMR framework from going through the Nearpod presentation and watching the video on the SAMR model, we'll talk about, well, what does that really mean in terms of instructional design? So our focus right now is going to be on how we take and move those lessons and we move them up that SAMR ladder from substitution to redefinition. So what does that really mean? Well, you learned that substitution is just basically substituting, that we take what we have been doing and now we just digitize it. So that is substitution. As you think about augmentation, it's still doing similar things like you would have been doing, but now we have some significant enhancements, like maybe recording their voice, explaining a concept, collaborating online. All of those types of things move it from substituting to actually doing something a little bit different with it. But where things really change is when we come across this line and we start to really modify our instruction. So now maybe students are demonstrating their understanding and they're creating. So using technology to create instead of consume. And that they could share that project somehow with the class, that digital workflow piece set up somewhere. And that students can actually learn from one another. Maybe we're all doing something a little bit different and we go listen to someone else's project and learn from them. And then redefinition is when we are really up at the top of Bloom's, synthesizing material, investigating, collaborating, and then creating some sort of a project. So that's often found by iterating your work. Like the first time through, like that's a great first attempt, but I bet we could do better. And then getting feedback from peers and then sharing that to a broader community. So let's really unpack that a little bit. So what are some examples kind of those? And if we kind of looked at what substitution would be, is you've done a worksheet, now you're just doing it in Notability or Pages or Google Docs. It's just electronic. Maybe you've always created a presentation on paper, now you're just doing it digitally. Or using a timer app just to manage time, reading a book online, reading a book on paper, substituting. Augmentation, we talked, if you add that audio feature, and that's in a lot of different apps and things, that will take things up a notch. So now I'm doing everything paper could do, but now I've got my voice. You could use some drawing feature in some different apps or things to capture ideas. Modifying is when you start to take that instruction and design things different. So what could formative assessments look like? Maybe using some movie kinds of things or green screen, some kind of a thing where we're doing some kind of reflection, performing kinds of things, creating those digital stories and using digital tools to help make that available on demand for people. And redefinition would be, again, coming up with maybe using some tools to make a podcast or writing that book and then sharing it with a community in Pages or Book Creator, producing maybe a documentary, and then again, sharing to that broader audience. So I mentioned we are using iPads. So these are some of those apps then that you can use as you move from substituting to augmenting to modifying to redefining. Now, as we note as we move through here, you can see some of the apps are used in multiple areas. So it's not the app itself, it's how we design the instruction that takes students from substitution to augmentation to modification and redefinition. And it doesn't have to be something that we move up. You can go from substitution to redefinition just by how you think about that instructional design. So that's the student side, but on the teacher side, what does substitution look like if I'm teaching? So substitution when I'm teaching can be something similar, that maybe I'm just using a learning management system to collect assignments. So instead of you handing it in electronically, you submit it in Blackboard or Schoology or somewhere. Now maybe having students type a paper instead of write one, or do a presentation to teach a group of people. And again, for teaching, if we go in augmentation, using that audio feature to give students descriptive feedback. And so using that idea of even a screencast for some feedback, giving kids a template to fill out and having them access it and use it. So as we start to design and think about on the teaching end, what modification might look like is delivering lessons to small groups. So that station rotation model, and pairing that with some tools like a class kicker and Nearpod. Maybe using those teacher created videos, those screencasts, made and explain everything, or Screencastify, QuickTime Player, but you could host those in a learning management system. We use Schoology. You could use Seesaw. You can use Canvas, Blackboard, Google Classroom. You can be also using some in-the-moment data. Use things like Socrative, Quizzes, Quizlet, Class Kick, Nearpod. Those start to really change the game because now kids get feedback immediately instead of maybe the next instructional block. And redefinition would be making those differentiated lessons. So keeping those so that they could be student-paced and really thinking about what tools could we use to do that and what would that look like. And providing that digital space for students so that they can learn from one another. While our feedback is wonderful, the power comes in with them giving one another feedback. And having some of the voice and choice in how they want to show mastery. So using those choice boards to really start having an individual rotation plan for students. So again, here are some of those apps, and it's again how we're going to use those apps as we move our lessons up that SAMR ladder. So it's not having millions and millions of tools, but it's having a couple handfuls of tools and really being able to leverage those impactfully with your curriculum. So as we start to really reflect on lesson design, we start to think, what will I gain by replacing that task with a digital task? And if I'm substituting, if I'm gaining nothing, then maybe keep doing it on paper the way we've always done it. But we ask ourselves then, if we're augmenting, is there some sort of tech that could be added that might improve this task? If so, let's use it. And modification, is that task really changing now with that use of technology? How could I really change that task now that I can have technology? And is it possible to use technology to do things that was inconceivable before? And if so, how could I use that? What opportunities do students have? And how can I help them get there? So what would that really look like then? So I got a couple sample lessons just that you can read through, but this would be the assignment: create an informational presentation. And then what that would look like. So at the substitution level, using something like Google Presentations, make a slideshow. Augmentation would be that same idea, but now how about recording some of that audio? Modification could be something like make a who knew video and sharing it with classmates on a discussion board and having students give some tag feedback to a peer. So modifying that task is just how we're thinking about using those tools and workflows to give students an audience, a broader audience. And for redefinition, some of that choice coming in here with creation and collaboration with a small group. Maybe something like a paper slide video or a green screen project, and then sharing those on a discussion board. That could be done in any variety of ways. So it could be Schoology, Seesaw, just giving them that audience to learn from. Here's another one. Let's run through a vocab packet. So substitution, they just open the vocab template into Book Creator and fill in the blanks. Augmentation, same thing, use Book Creator, but use the audio. And use some tag feedback to a peer. Modification, we could still be working here with our Frayer model, but now students can take a picture and add it to like a Chatterpix, add their definition, use the word in a sentence, and then sharing those out somehow. And again, we use Schoology. You can do that same sort of sharing if you create that workflow in Seesaw, Google Classroom, Canvas, Blackboard. Redefinition, students share a video of their word and then they go and learn from their peers. So we know in Danielson, when you are all the way to distinguished, you're having students learn from students. So using technology to help make that happen. Here are some resources, and I will go ahead and link these up for you, but here is a lesson plan template, and then our blended walkthrough resource. And we say, like, if you go through this blended walkthrough resource and you have got things happening from 2 of those 5 categories in a class period, you've got blended learning going on. These are our core apps. Here are some of our creation examples and a couple articles and a video to take a peek at too. So this is the template, and the challenge would be to take your own lesson up SAMR. And this is a Google Doc, so I will just link it up here. But you can put down your objectives and your assignments, and then you can write what that would look like at substitution, and then what would it look like at augmentation, and how would you change it to make it modification or redefinition. So not that every lesson is going to be here at redefinition, but as we are planning our lessons and really thinking about that lesson design, keeping that in mind, because we want those lessons to be different. And if it's just substitution, is technology really the best thing to be using right then and there? Those are just things that we think. And these examples, I will let you just click through at your own pace through this presentation, but these are some that our instructional coaches were thinking about as well. And you can just kind of check those out. Again, they are linked below, so you can just take a peek at those to give you some ideas as you create your own lessons.